Hello and welcome to Think Up. In today's program, I want to talk about the recent killings of 4 well-known women in Iraq. I've invited Esam Shoukry from the Left Worker Communist Party of Iraq to talk to us about it. Welcome, Esam.
Thank you very much, Patty, for having me.
Esam, this has been a very, very bad development in Iraq. In the last 2 months, there were 4 women, very well-known women, executed, assassinated in Iraq, it looks like. Can you tell us a little bit more about these women?
Yes, Patty, there are 4 women in Iraq who were killed. 2 of them, I believe, in August, the month of August, and 2 very recently. So Wardell Ali, for example, was an activist in Basra, was killed about 2-3 weeks ago, and by unknown sources or people. And there was Tara al-Faris, who was the beauty queen of Iraq, or the Miss Iraq, if you want, that was assassinated in broad daylight in the streets of Baghdad. And the other 2 women, one of them is a makeup surgeon, or plastic surgeon, I'm sorry. And the other one was also dealing with, beauty products and stuff like that. So, and she had a program. Both had some programs. They have some Facebook followers, and they became sort of famous in Iraq. So these 4 women were killed in broad daylight. They weren't assassinated in the night at home. It was in broad daylight. Yes.
So tell us a little bit more about one of them, Wardell Ali, who was an activist, and she was also quite prominent in the protests that we have recently seen in Basra, and we had another program about this as well. Tell us a little bit more about her and the situation in Basra.
Well, so Wardell Ali, as far as I know, and from the news, and also we issued a declaration denouncing her death and describing her assassination as terrorism. In fact, what has been done to Wardell Ali is terrorism. And I also linked the other, I also would apply terrorism to the 3 women who were assassinated in Baghdad and Basra. This is an act of terrorism, and I can explain why. But as far as Wardell Ali is concerned, she was a very provocative and very revolutionary woman who participated in the uprising in Basra, the secular uprising in Basra, calling for freedom, calling for civil rights, or a civil society, calling for secularism, and calling for a bigger role for women, and denouncing the Islamists, denouncing the militias. So her assassination was well calculated by those forces who felt the threat of the uprising in Basra. And that was the message that they would have given to anyone who opposed their rule, their looting in the society, their corruption, their subjugation of women, and all the rest that the world knows by now. A gang of mafia is ruling Iraq, and they unleash their underground militias to assassinate women. I can talk probably more about why women, but I think Wardell Ali was a brave and courageous Iraqi woman who wanted Iraq to get rid of these and to have a better future and a more equal society. That's why she was killed brutally by these forces.
So is this an issue of women's rights in Iraq, or is it an issue more, or also of secular, modern women especially, versus more traditional reactionary forces? What are we seeing?
Well, you're right, Patty. This is a women issue, women liberation issue, as much because I couldn't kind of dismantle the situation into categories. I cannot categorize the issue because it's one entity. Iraq is under the most brutal, backward, uncivilized forces it had ever seen in its modern history. Women are the symbol of freedom. In my view, women are symbol of freedom. So when the uprising, when the changes that happened, i.e., or for example, the modern egalitarian secularization in the streets of Baghdad and Basra and Tehran, uh, the women were at the forefront. I think this is part of a women uprising. And if anything in the Middle East happens, it should be led by women, and it is being led by women, and this is the evidence. The evidence that the women are punished because the women are spearheading this secularization movement, this radical movement, this equality-loving movement, and I would call them so these socialist movement because it uh, elaborates the ambitions, the hopes of the whole society of Iraq for equality, for freedom, for modernization, for civil rights, for individual rights, for getting rid of religion, pushing it away to the margins, pushing away tribalism to the margin, pushing away ethnicity and ethnic division of society. Women are symbols of freedom, and that's why I think that's particularly why religious people, religious forces, and political Islam, with the collaboration of Islamic regime in Iran, have planned to kill that spearhead, to have the people fear or live in fear, and in my view, in a failed attempt to curb the uprising. I don't think it's going to happen, but I think this is symbolically heavy. Women have a role, a big role to play, and I link it also to the worldwide. I mean, nobody now can do any sexual harassment of the women in words, by touching, in action, by beating. Now it's not easy. It's not the time now. Even I link it to the movement that's happening in the West, in the U.S., for example. Not Me Too, for example. Kavanaugh, the one who was elected by Trump to be at the head of the Supreme Court, and how he was proposed. All of this is happening. Women are rising. And unfortunately, because Iraq is living under militias, because Iraq has no government, this is happening to the most courageous women in Iraq. And unfortunately, more women will probably shed blood, more secularists. But I think the movement is so strong that will prevail in the end, and it will win.
Because now you've just had a newly elected government in Iraq. And at the same time, what we also have, there is another beauty queen who a couple of days ago actually said that she has received threats online saying, "You are next." So will the government be able, or will the government actually be doing something about this, or what would be an alternative, or what is the alternative?
Well, Mr. Abadi, the Prime Minister of Iraq, I don't know if I should call him the ex-Prime Minister, but the Prime Minister of Iraq said that the perpetrators would be brought to justice. And, you know, the cliches that we hear from government heads and government officials to appease and to calm down the people. There were a lot of protests on the social media. There's a lot of anger and disdain for what's happening, and they blame the government. And I also blame the government, accuse the Iraqi government and its militias. Now, when I say government, there's no such thing as a normal government, but the government is composed of militias. This is the byproduct of Hizb al-Dawah, al-Majlis al-A'la, Hezbollah, Muqtada al-Sadr. All these groups are breeding fascism, Islamic fascism. The rulers of Iraq are Islamic fascists. And we have to know that they are not normal as political parties. Not even, I couldn't compare them to the right wing that is rising now in some parts of Europe. It's not even close to that. In Iraq, they are ruling, Islamic fascists are ruling, and they are unleashed to the society because there is no government. Each one has its own militia, and they are killing, and they have a list. And we know that, for example, the dancer, the young girl who was dancing on YouTube, and she was detained by the Islamic regime, and she was
in Iran. You're talking about the young girl in Iran. Yes,
exactly. I'm linking the two incidents. So the women of Iraq are not blindfolded, and social media is all over the world. They see this girl that has been detained and imprisoned. So they want freedom. They want to dance. They want to have happiness. They want to show that they are equal. They are worthy of living as a human being, and that is what's happening now. I think this government is a failure. The new government would be even more failure, because the composition of the government is one and the same. The content, forget about the shape or the form. It's the content that is correct, and the content that has, it's based on the American model that was installed in Iraq 15 years ago. The militia models, they call it the components of Iraqi society. It's not citizenship, it's components, ethnic and religious and sectarian. This model prevails with many faces as you want, but it's not going to change.
Esam, so last quick question. What is the alternative then for people to prevent further killings?
The alternative is to get rid of this model. This model is a failure. Iraqi people know this model, the American model, the model that is based on dividing the society into sects and religions and tribals, is a failure. The model that should prevail, which we as a party defend and promote and advocate for, is a secular government. We aim for a socialist government in Iraq, but the content of that socialist government is secularization of the society, secularization of the government, meaning the separation of religion from the mosque. I would say mosque, this is a new terminology, this is state from church, but now I say state from mosque. And that separation is for the benefit of the people. I believe every woman who was assassinated dreamt of that. That was her dream, because freedom, you can do whatever you like when you have, for example, your council or your parliament, whatever it is, the legislation body, it is done by the people, not 1400 years old documents that are imposed from barbaric times on the peoples, on the modern peace-loving, loving people of Iraq. So our alternative calls for a secular government of Iraq that will retain individualism, that will retain modernity, that will retain citizenship for every single man and woman in Iraq, and we live in equality. So this is our alternative. I call upon all these women, I call upon all the youth of Iraq and all workers to join us in order to get this implemented and activated in Iraq.
Esam Shoukry, thank you very much for being on the program.
Thank you very much, Patty, for having me.
This was Think Up. Until next time, goodbye.